Okay. Hi, everyone. We're really excited to sort of be able to talk to you today about our experiences and let you meet a couple of the grad students in the department. We only sort of represent our own experiences, but hopefully we have a wide range of experiences and we can sort of share with you what things have been like for us in the department, in Ann Arbor, things like that. We're really disappointed that we can't actually meet you in person, but hopefully we'll get to see you soon in the fall here in Michigan. So to start it off, I'm going to have each of our wonderful panelists introduce themselves. And so we'll start with Joyce. Joyce, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joyce Ho. I'm a first year in the department. I'm just in the sociology program, so I'm not joint with anything. I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. I am interested in economic sociology and the sociology of knowledge very broadly. And I came to Michigan directly out of undergrad, and I did my undergrad at Toronto. And I'm an international student. I don't think that my experience is super representative in terms of having to live in a new culture and perhaps write in my second language and stuff like that, but I have had to deal with a lot of the red tape that does come with being an international student.
You can go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Aya Wallerbay. I'm a second year in the sociology department, not joint either. I am a Detroit native, born and raised in the city of Detroit, which is about 40 minutes outside of Ann Arbor, driving. My research studies broadly the sociology of higher education, but my project focuses on identity narration and college admissions processes and the messages particularly Black students receive about narrating their racial identities and college personal statements and what universities then do once those students get on campus. So it's a very multi-leveled and multi-layered project, so I won't get into too much of the weeds, but I'm looking at admissions, affirmative action, bans, and a lot of other really interesting things in higher education. And I worked some time between my undergrad degree in DC and now I've kind of lived in England, lived in Phoenix, and pretty nomadic. So though I'm from Detroit, I did move here from Phoenix, Arizona, which was an interesting kind of experience. So yeah.
So
My name is awesome. My name is Billy. I'm a fourth year in the sociology department. I'm also not joint. My research interests lie at the intersection of race, gender, sexuality, and work in organizations. Before coming to Michigan, I got my master's in sociology from Rice University in Houston, Texas, and my bachelor's from SUNY Oneonta. So moved a lot. And I'm originally from Long Island. So yeah, I've jumped around quite a bit.
Okay, I jump in. I am Kim Hess. I'm in my fifth year in the sociology program, also not joint. I'm originally from the Philadelphia area, and I did my undergrad degree at the University of Maryland in history. My advisor is Rob Jansen. My research really broadly falls into political sociology, sociology of culture, and comparative historical sociology. I've also done international research for my publishable paper, which was on Indigenous inclusion in 19th century New Zealand, so other side of the world. My dissertation, though, will focus on minority representation and ideas of the nation in U.S. current K-12 social studies education. I think that's all I had.
Great. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. I realized I didn't introduce myself, though I'm not going to be talking quite as much. I'm going to be asking the questions. But I'm Elizabeth. I'm a fourth year in the Joint Policy and Sociology program. And I study sort of broadly education and stratification. So I'm going to start with the first question, which is sort of generally, what has your life and experience been like living in Ann Arbor? And I'm going to have Aya start with this one.
Right, so living in Ann Arbor is a very interesting experience. So Ann Arbor is it's like a college town, but it's a a decent sized city, so it's there are some other industries here. It feels very suburban, and to me, as someone who's lived in major cities, um, but I would say it is. There's a lot of food. If you like food, there's quite a few restaurants, which is what I enjoy trying. Even as someone who's like vegetarian slash vegan, I still feel like there's tons of options there. And I mean, I think as a graduate student, you kind of make your own kind of communities, and that has been something that I've had to kind of do because I do feel like perhaps some of the bars or things, certain locations are more prone to undergraduate students. So living in Ann Arbor for me is kind of utilizing. I live on campus, so utilizing my residence to kind of have gatherings and also I don't know, trying to kind of make do what we have here in the spring, in the summer, and the fall. There are a lot of outside kind of activities, which is something I really appreciate. It's a very walkable city as well, so I think if you like to kind of walk or run, it's relatively flat, and you can really kind of take advantage of that. And I mentioned earlier in my introduction, I am from the city of Detroit. So I still, I don't have a car, so I sometimes take the Amtrak train to Detroit. And we also have a Michigan Connector bus that's $6 one way to the city of Detroit as well. So that's also an option if you feel like you want more of a city kind of experience. But I do think overall, it's as students here who are like, if you're going to be doing a lot of work, so I kind of make do with the environment here, and I'm sure there's other folks who've lived in Ann Arbor a little longer who could add to that.
Yeah, I would echo a bunch of what was just said. I think it took me a while to adjust to Ann Arbor. I had spent most of my time before that in either New York City or Houston, so I was used to much larger cities than Ann Arbor. And at first, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't my cup of tea, but it can grow on you. And I think that there are a couple of things about Ann Arbor. I mean, I've moved away because I'm doing my collecting data in New York City for my dissertation, but a lot of the things, there are some pretty exceptional things about Ann Arbor. For instance, one of the things that I thought was really cool while I was there is that Michigan has the top musical theater or theater program in the entire country. And so for $15, you can go and watch performances that are literally going to be, and the performers are pretty much going to be on Broadway in a couple of years. In fact, people that I saw my first year when I was there are now on Broadway or on TV. So that's pretty cool. And the town really does seem, or city, really does seem to revolve around college sports, especially in the fall. You are not going to escape football on Saturday. You're not going to. So you can either like kind of get into that, or you're going to have to avoid downtown on Saturdays. But I mean, there's some charm to all of it. But like Aya said, the food is actually really, really good in Ann Arbor. And as somebody, I spent a lot of time in, like, again, New York City, and but the food in Ann Arbor, really, there are a lot of places that rival the quality of food that you can find in like other really big cities.
And I forgot to add this. I also mentioned that I live in Ann Arbor proper, and as you all know, as graduate students, you receive a stipend. And I would say now Ann Arbor is much more expensive than I thought, moving from Phoenix here. However, I do feel that you can either choose to live in Ann Arbor proper if you need to be or want to be closer to campus, or like a lot of my friends, they live in Ypsilanti, which is a suburb. It's kind of right across the Ann Arbor line, so a lot of people would live there or find apartments there that are a few $100s cheaper, and they'll either take the bus in, which we ride the Ann Arbor city buses for free with our M cards, which is really great, or they'll drive in if they have cars and try to manage parking. Again, I don't have a car, so don't know too much about that world per se, but I do find that I can do more than survive on the stipend, which is really reassuring, especially as someone who worked full time. But there are also opportunities to, I don't know, other ways to get extra funding in other ways. So perhaps we'll talk about that later. But I would say it is an expensive place. I chose to live in the Munger Graduate Residence, which is on campus. It's about a 3-minute walk max from the department, which is really great. And Joyce also lives there, maybe she could talk to you about her experience as well. So just wanted to share that as well.
Yeah, I also chose to live in Munger in my first year, and I would say that I've really enjoyed it. I think there's going to be some information on the recruitment website about it. I talked to Eleni. Um, but yeah, it's really nice to be really, really close to the department in my first year because I have to be on campus so much for classes and in the department. I would say living in Munger, about half of my monthly stipend goes to rent, and then I mostly cook at home. So yeah, in that way, for a single person, it's pretty livable, I think. And then in terms of going back to just things to do in Ann Arbor, as Aya said, there are a lot of outdoor things. So I often like to take walks in the Arboretum, which is basically like a really big nature kind of park with trails and a river and stuff like that. And then we have an art gallery right across from the department where I go sometimes if I don't feel like doing work. Um, and yeah, in the summer well, I think all year actually, there's a farmer's market and some good window shopping around that farmer's market area.
So I can talk about not living in Ann Arbor. But living in Michigan still, so not like Billy, where Billy gets to go to fun places. So the first 2 years of grad school, I lived actually right at the edge of Ann Arbor, so right in between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. So I did have a car. I've had a car the whole time. Parking is fine if that's something you're worried about. There's lots of parking by the football stadium, which is where most of us as grad students get to park, and then it's a quick 15-20 minute walk to LSA from there. And the reason why I lived on the edge of Ann Arbor, right next to the highway, was actually because I moved here with a partner who got a job in Lansing. So if anyone wants to hear more about that experience or trying to move for grad school with someone else who also has job considerations, please feel free to email me and I can talk about that more. So for 2 years, lived right on the edge of Ann Arbor, and now I live in a small town that's about 45 minutes away from Ann Arbor, in between Ann Arbor and Lansing. So how much there is to do in Ann Arbor depends on your perspective too. So we moved from DC, so compared to DC, there's a lot less to do in Ann Arbor, but compared to the tiny towns that I live now, there's a lot to do in Ann Arbor. That's where most of the food and shopping and cultural things are, that Ann Arbor and Detroit. So there are things to do. Oh, my other thing that I have here is Ann Arbor is also close to the airport. So that is something that I considered going to grad school, and also something to consider if you're worried that there's not going to be enough for you to do, or you want to make sure you can travel for research or to visit family or anything like that. It's 20-25 minutes from Ann Arbor to the airport. There's a bus that runs regularly that's not super expensive. I think $12, right? $12 one way. So there are things to do. But as I said, we've got lots of work to do too, so.
And I will add one more thing that I thought of. Given the fact that, yeah, we are doing a lot of work, one thing that's really nice about Ann Arbor and that I miss a lot is like how convenient it is in a lot of ways. Like a lot of things that you need are going to be just a 5-minute walk from each other. Everything is very concentrated in a particular area. And I know that might not sound like super great, but it really can be, especially when you're pressed for time or you have like an hour in between meetings or classes or something and you need to like run an errand. I mean, everything that you need is kind of going to be right there, and it's very, very walkable. Cold most of the year, but it's very, very walkable and easy to get to.
Yeah, it's definitely an easy place to live, what I would say.
All right, great. So I guess we'll move on to sort of the general question that a lot of people want to know, which is why did each of you choose Michigan? And you can sort of talk about other options you had, either specifically or just in general, like how you sort of thought through that decision. And I'll start with Joyce here, since she's closest to that decision-making process.
Yeah. So just for context, I wasn't set on Michigan at all. When I visited, I wasn't sure, and I actually made my decision pretty much at like 11:50 p.m. on April 15th, which was the date that you're supposed to make your decision. And I would not recommend that, but I do think that I made the right decision, so I don't know. um, I also moved here without having to take into consideration the needs of partners or children. So that's something just to contextualize. And I think I'm just going to talk about my own experience because I think everyone has a really idiosyncratic experience with choosing their program. And I don't know that I have any like general advice because it was also specific. But I was kind of crazy about this. I made a huge spreadsheet and I had the list of like faculty and pros and cons, and then location, pros and cons, placement, pros and cons, and then what I could glean about the culture from my visits, which unfortunately you're going to have to try to glean from all this online stuff. Um, and that spreadsheet, I think, did help me narrow things down. But ultimately, I I don't know. I don't think that there's a rational way to make a decision, as unsatisfying as that sounds. And one of my professors at the University of Toronto told me you should just follow your gut ultimately. And that's what I did. um, but a few reasons why I did pick Michigan, I think, were first of all, the faculty were a good fit. There are a number of faculty who work in the realm of economic sociology. There's an economic sociology workshop, so that was a good signal. I also had positive meetings with the faculty members that I wanted to potentially work with. So I would say definitely pay attention to that, and not just their bios on the website or what they say that they're working on the website. Definitely try to make the most of your meetings with faculty, and that could be asking questions like, what are you working on right now? Do you see any opportunities for RAs or students to work with you, et cetera, et cetera. I also thought that the program was a good balance between having the freedom to do your own intellectual work and also having a structure that would sort of guide you through and work you more towards the professionalization aspect, or like getting you prepared for the job market. We have structure like a third year paper, and I'm sure others can speak to that. In the first year, we have a pro seminar, which sort of gets you acquainted with the department, and also, introduces you to a bunch of grad students and faculty members. And then I also am a person who really likes stability. And so I was fine with moving to a city that is a little calmer. I think that really suits me. And then ultimately, I just went with my gut. So, yeah.
I guess I'll add to that. So there were some factors that were super important to me. So broadly, location, funding, prestige, faculty, and diversity, which is kind of a part of all those things, frankly, for me. Um, and so again, I had a slightly different kind of personal, and these decisions are personal. So my family, I've lived the past 9 years away, so I wanted to be closer to my family who are in Detroit. And I know I didn't want to live in a rural kind of place. I wanted to be close to a city, and I just didn't want to feel isolated during this time of my life. So that was actually super important to me. Prestige, as superficial or shallow as it may sound, was also super important to me, and thinking about just conversations with my like sociology department at Georgetown and other programs. When I mentioned that Michigan was a university that I was considering, they was like, wow, it's fantastic. It's like one of the top programs. They also told me it was known to have one of the more diverse kind of faculty and graduate student populations, which was super important to me. Um, and then funding was incredibly important. So not only did I want full funding, something that I did not realize mattered at the time, because I had never done PhD gotten a PhD before was dental insurance, and that has been so in our packages we get shout out to our graduate kind of union. We have dental insurance, we have health insurance, and there's some universities that don't have dental insurance for their students. And I have been able to really get a lot of like important like dental work done, and not having to worry about affording health insurance and et cetera. And I think that's something that was super, super important. And I had not realized that that would be a kind of selling point until once I was in the program. So we're super fortunate in that regard. So that was important to me. And then the faculty, I think Joyce hit a lot of great points, because there was a lot of things I didn't know. So I did do the website to see who. I also had a spreadsheet, Joyce, of looking at pros and cons as well. And then the meetings, kind of engaging with the faculty, sharing what I envision my project will look like, and feeling like people were both excited and offering kind of resources and helping me kind of think through some questions, even at our first meetings. Those types of things kind of really stuck out to me. So there were a lot of different factors, but those were some of the main ones that I was drawn to. And Michigan was my top choice. So I feel like I got lucky that it worked out.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to answer this question. I transferred in from another graduate program and another PhD program, and I pretty much, well, not pretty much, I followed my advisor to Michigan, and I didn't actually know that I was going to be coming to Michigan until like late April, before like the April prior. So I didn't get to visit. I didn't get to talk with faculty. I didn't get to do any of the all the things that you should do before choosing a program. I was pretty content with following my advisor here and trusting that it would work out. So I don't know that I can speak too much about the decision-making process, but I can definitely talk a bit later on about how my experience at Michigan compared to my experience at another PhD program, and what I think Michigan is exceptionally good at and what, maybe not. But so my whole recruitment process was pretty different.
I'm also the farthest from the recruitment process. So I think I remember my decision making. I did not have a spreadsheet, which now I feel like I should have had a spreadsheet. I could have tracked everything. So I'm just going to echo what Aya and Joyce said, which is that it is a very individual decision. So there are some things that I think we all consider, which are faculty fit. So who are the faculty there? What are their areas and interests? But also, what is the department strong in? So I am a comparative historical sociologist, and that is not necessarily mainstream sociology. So there are only a certain number of departments that kind of focus on that area. So that was big for me. But how much that matters will depend on what type of sociology you're interested in doing. So there are some fields that you'd have many more options for schools that are strong in that sense. But like Aya said too, it's faculty fit, but also, are faculty excited about your research? Are they willing to talk to you about it? Does it seem like they'll be willing to help you? Do they give you good kind of insight and advice? Which is something that you should start to be able to figure out even just from a virtual meeting with a faculty person. If you talk about what you're interested, you should feel like they're excited about it. And then also funding, financial considerations are kind of, I guess, the two big things that I think everyone considers. So faculty fit, kind of department fit, and then also funding, financial, different funding packages, financial considerations. And then the other things that are important to you will depend on kind of who you are and what you're bringing with you. So if you have a partner that you're bringing with you, then you've got another person that you're kind of considering and thinking about. So that may be important or may not. And then it ultimately comes down to your gut feeling. So I think I chose Michigan for all of the practical and logistical reasons, but also because it felt right, which is not something I can quantify. But that the faculty were excited, the grad students that I met with were kind of friendly, willing to help. The department itself seemed friendly, well run, just kind of overall. So that was important to me. And I will say that I've also found that in my last 5 years here, is that the department is well run and most people are willing to help you.
Great. So before we move on to the next question, Billy, actually, would you talk a little bit about sort of your experience coming here from a different department and sort of, without, you don't have to like get fully into the details, but like just in general, like how do they compare and what are some things that you think Michigan does really well or not well, given that you have sort of a comparison?
Yeah. So the program that I came from, I was very happy there. I loved it. Michigan. So when I was coming into Michigan, I was definitely a bit intimidated, A, about starting over, and B, about what it would be like to start over at a program like Michigan. I will say that Michigan does a really good job, comparatively speaking, at easing you into graduate school and your first year. They're not the first semester. I mean, the first semester is tough because you're getting acclimated to graduate school, but they do a really good job at kind of like, uh, easing you into the entire process and not overwhelming you all at once. Michigan is also an incredibly collaborative department. You are encouraged to meet with faculty. You are encouraged to run your ideas by them, to co-author with other graduate students, to present that work. I mean, it really is like a culture of collaboration. The department culture, I mean, I know that this is something that departments might say even if it weren't true, but at Michigan, really, it's a very friendly department culture. People are really supportive of one another. I haven't found much competitiveness among students, like at all. People are generally like very supportive of one another and encouraging of each other's successes. It's pretty tight knit. I mean, the graduate students, the sociology graduate student club will like throw monthly happy hours that people will attend. There's a lot of hanging out outside of the department as well, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and I think we're probably going to get into it a bit later with advising, but I would say that the advising structure is pretty great at Michigan, and it does vary depending on who you work with, what the structure of that relationship looks like. But you have the faculty's ear in a way that you don't at other departments. I mean, it wouldn't be unusual at all for you to email a professor and ask them to like look at a draft of your paper and then sit down and have an hour-long conversation about the entire thing, or have multiple faculty who are willing to sit down, read your paper, and meet with you to discuss it. So, and they do a really good job at obviously preparing you for the job market. And there's a professionalization seminar that's required of you your first semester, which is really helpful and kind of gives you the ins and outs of sociology and academia and the different aspects of graduate school. So yeah.
Great. And so we're going to jump back to Billy for this question also. So can you tell me a little bit about your experiences working with faculty, both advisors and as collaborators on research?
Yeah, so my advisor is Erin Seck, and that is definitely the faculty member that I work most closely with. I mean, it's hard to almost disentangle the advisor from collaborator, because I think that part of our advisee like relationship has been collaboration. I think that was one of the ways in which I really got to learn the research process is by going through projects with her, starting from my very first year on. Very willing to look at drafts and meet with me about pretty much anything, as have all the faculty members that I've interacted with been. But our collaborations, I mean, they've resulted in several publications. I've gotten to, travel literally all over the country collecting data. We were working on a massive project where we were surveying the largest STEM organizations in the country and analyzing data and writing up these consulting reports for them and meeting with the leaders to discuss issues of diversity and inclusion. I've gotten a lot of really great experience, both on the academic side and the non-academic side, more industry side, and through working with her. Yeah, and I think that's prepared me really well for the job market, having marketable skills both within academia and outside of it.
I can also talk about this. I have not done research collaboration with faculty, but I've gotten lots of advice, both formal from my advisor. So my advisor is Rob. And so anyone who's thinking about working with Rob, I mean, I know you've all contacted him or been in contact with him because he's grad director, but in terms of being a faculty member, he's also really great. Very open, kind of generous with his time, gives really great feedback, willing to read multiple drafts and meet, whenever I need to meet. Which is true of Rob, but is also true of most of the faculty that I've worked with. I mean, each faculty member has their own kind of idiosyncrasies and their own kind of styles of providing feedback, but for the most part, everyone is really willing to talk with you, read what you've got. They're very generous with their time in developing grad students in that way. So the other people that were on my committee for my publishable paper were George Steinmetz and Jane Kim, who are also both very different from Rob in the kinds of feedback they give, but do give good feedback. So I think you'll find that. I'm trying to think if there's anyone who wouldn't be willing to do that. But I don't want to be over general. For the most part, everyone that I know who is working with faculty have found a faculty member in their area who will give them the kinds of feedback they need. That's what I'll say.
Joyce and Aya, you could speak to sort of either research collaborations that you've had, but also just sort of your first and second year advising and how that's been for you.
Yeah, I can go. So my advisor is Greta Krippner, and I think the way that, I mean, it's always going to be about open communication about what you need, and sort of like communicating that with your advisor. We sort of meet whenever I feel like I need her advice on something, and that has worked really well. So I knew prior to coming in that, or she had talked to me about a research assistant opportunity, and so I have just started that this semester. I would say that people shouldn't be too anxious about sort of immediately jumping onto a faculty member's project or like immediately knowing what you want to do in the first year of grad school, especially. Greta has really encouraged me to treat this first year as sort of an exploration and sort of like broadening my horizons and broadening my interests rather than narrowing them down right away. And I think that's been good advice. I would say I have a cohort of 12, and I think maybe around half are working on a faculty member's project as an RA of some sort right now. And I think maybe one or two have immediately jumped onto projects where they could be potential collaborators. But I think, I mean, either way, it's just about getting experience, and it's not sort of a necessity in your first year.
And I'll say, so I've had a very non-traditional advisor kind of experience in my second year again. So my advisor is Elizabeth Armstrong, and on my first year, she received a kind of fellowship. She was kind of on sabbatical in California, so I had a surrogate advisor, if you, I guess perhaps I can call him Roy Levine. And so he kind of stepped in and supported me throughout my first year. I guess relatively informally. I don't know if he was my advisor on paper per se, but he kind of really supported me in my first year throughout fellowship processes and etc. And then also while Elizabeth was away, she kind of asked me to be on her research kind of Title IX project, which is a project she is kind of leading with another professor, Danny Levitsky, in our department. So, I mean, I think a lot of advisors, or what it appears, a lot of advisors would kind of invite their students onto projects. I ultimately had to take a break from that project, though, because I had to reach capacity, which I think is a super kind of important thing to remember, particularly when you're earlier on in your program, as we're all trying to kind of navigate being a graduate student and navigating our own coursework, and in my case now we're navigating teaching. I've had to make sure I've kind of prioritized my own research, my own kind of work, and also my mental health. So I had to step down, but I mean, both Sandy and Elizabeth have said whenever you're ready and you have the capacity, we would love to have you back. So that has been also really reassuring about for me, and also to Joyce's point, where it's really like a personal kind of thing. And in your first year and even your second year, it's okay to kind of get a lay of the land, explore, see what advisor or what the faculty are working on, and be kind of intentional, perhaps in your third year or so, to kind of really dive in. And that's okay if you're not immediately something that I've learned.
There's some feedback from someone happening right now, and I don't know who it is, but
Yeah, I hear it too.
oh, it stopped.
I will say, just jumping in, one point is that I think, well, the department does assign you a first year advisor, and I think that's really a good move, because then you have someone who you can go to, and it's their job to sort of guide you through this first year. But I think Rob will emphasize this, that you can switch at any point. You're not tied to this person after first year. But yeah, I think it's been really helpful to have someone who I know that I can and am supposed to go to them for advice.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's pretty great about Michigan and the advising is we're not really operating under an apprenticeship model, which my last program did, and it was like you work under one faculty member and you work very closely with them on their research and your research. At Michigan, you're really encouraged to work with like a lot of different faculty. And so my committee is Erin Seck, Elizabeth Armstrong, and Al Young, but I've also sought advice from a number of different faculty, including Karen Lacey and Margot Mahan. But yeah, I think that at Michigan, even though you have an advisor, you shouldn't feel as though that's the only person that you should go to for advice or collaboration or to read your paper. In fact, you should not be doing that. You have a lot of faculty at Michigan who are all experts in the field, and you can utilize all of them. And you should feel free to kind of have a wide array of professors that you're working with or talking to throughout your time at Michigan.
And that's actually something, that I recommend when you're in your first and your second year, so Joyce and Aya, is to, if you haven't already, meet with lots of faculty members, because it gives you a good reason of, you want to hear more about their research or talk to them about your ideas. So sort of like an extension of the meetings that you all will have or have had around recruitment, where you're just trying to kind of get to know each other, but doing that once you're actually in the program too. And faculty will, for the most part, be willing to do that with you, sit down and meet for 20, 30 minutes and just talk with you. And then you're kind of building that relationship. Another way to do that is through workshops and classes, which also get you to kind of the same point in that relationship with faculty, because you are kind of building your advising team. So you want to have different people you can go to, like Billy was saying, and people with different areas of expertise, but also different, again, types of feedback. And the only way you're going to get to know that is by talking with faculty people.
Yeah, that's great. So Aya mentioned actually, oh, sorry, Billy,
Yes.
did you have something?
Can I just add one thing? Going back to sort of why pick Michigan, it's important. You're not going to. It's important to not look for like maybe one faculty member at a department that kind of encapsulates all of your research interests, that is doing the exact thing you want to do. That probably isn't going to exist, and also that might not be a good interpersonal fit. So you don't want to bank on one faculty member when you're making this decision. You really don't. And one of the nice things about Michigan is that we have a very large like faculty base. And so there are a lot of people working in the areas that you're interested in, or I mean, in the general like sort of areas that you're interested in. So I think that that's one thing that I've really liked about Michigan. I work pretty closely with my advisor, but I have some interests that don't necessarily match hers. And so I can go to Karen Lacey, for example, and be like, I really need help thinking through like this. And that's completely available because I go to Michigan, which has a lot of people working in a bunch of different areas. So
Yeah, and that's also good if your interests completely change or change a lot after your first year, which can and does happen.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So I had mentioned balancing teaching with sort of other responsibilities. A lot of you coming in, part of your funding package or a large chunk of your funding package will come with a graduate student instructor assignment, which is kind of, it's what we call a TA. I'm hoping that our sort of panelists can talk a little bit about what that means and what their experiences are. So I'm going to quickly consolidate and sort of suggest things to talk about. So Kim, I would love if you could talk about your experiences teaching both as a graduate student instructor and as the instructor of record over the summer, which you can explain a little bit what that means. Aya, I know you've had experience teaching in the department, which would be great to talk about, but I know you also have had experience teaching elsewhere, and so that would be really helpful if you could talk a little bit about those experiences that you've had. And then Billy, chime in. I know that you've also taught in the department and potentially at Rice, and if you could sort of talk a little bit about that, that'd be great. And then Joyce, when you hop in, if you could talk about sort of your experiences in classes as a sort of first year and what that's been like, that would be awesome. All right, go.
Okay, I'm starting, right? It was like rapid fire. Okay, I've taught so much, is what I'm going to preface this with, at Michigan. I taught before that too. But here I've taught 4 semesters as a GSI, so during the semester. And that experience depends a lot on the faculty that you're working with. So I taught research methods with Rachel Best, sociology of culture with Muge Gocek, and sociology of race and ethnicity with Karen Lacey. And all of those experiences were very different because they're different classes to start, but also the faculty member leading them has very different teaching styles, ways of structuring classes. So when you're a GSI during the semester, that experience does depend a lot on the class you're teaching and who you're going to be teaching with, who your lead instructor is. And then over the summer, I've taught twice as the instructor of record, which just means that I'm the one in charge of the whole class. So I've taught sociological theory and research methods last summer and the summer before. And that I have more fun with because you get to decide what the class is. It's more responsibility because you're responsible for coming up with the syllabus, leading all of the classes, but summer classes are smaller, so you get a more fun experience with students. And then this year, I've also been leading our GSI training class, which is Soc 993, which is a 1-credit class. Aya took it with me last semester, which is why she's smiling and nodding. It's a 1-credit class that everyone has to take their first time teaching in the department. So when you teach for the first time, you're not thrown into it with absolutely no guidance. So we have a 2-day training that our Center for Research on Learning and Teaching does before the semester starts. You'll have an orientation in the sociology department, and then you'll meet every week-ish with a group of people who are also teaching for the first time and someone who's leading that class. And you'll talk through basics of teaching, what it's like to be a GSI. It's meant to be instruction for you. So again, you're not thrown into the deep end with no experience or knowledge about how to teach, but also a support network with other people who are teaching too. And then in the fall, I'll be teaching my own freshman writing class. So there's a lot. I've taught a lot, but I also want to say that even though we are an R1 university, does have a lot of opportunities to develop your teaching if that's something that you are interested in coming in or something you become interested in as you go. So we do have a whole center for research on learning and teaching. We also have our Sweetland Writing Center, and both of those have a decent amount of funding and different training opportunities. So again, if you want to hear more about that, you can email me. I'm happy to talk about teaching and the different resources and opportunities that Michigan has around teaching too. Okay, that's all I had.
Yeah, so as Elizabeth mentioned, so I've also taught, this is my second semester teaching undergrads. So teaching is a very interesting experience. So on one hand, it is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. I love teaching so much. I enjoy, I've always said I want to be a PhD, so this is my time to shine as a GSI. So I'm just yeah, I love it. So that's one thing, but on the other hand, it is a lot of work, and it's particularly a lot of work for those of you or us who teach in our second years and potentially our third years, because we're also simultaneously taking classes. So it becomes a heavier load because if you're like me, I've taught 2 classes. Last semester was a law and society class, with Sandra Levitsky in our department. It's a very popular class. It's always kind of maxed out. It's a large lecture with 150 students. I teach 75 students, 3 classes of 25. Um, and there's a lot of assignments that you are responsible for grading, and you have to kind of manage your students' kind of anxieties about grades, but also making sure you're taking care of yourself and staying on top of their reading and your reading. So it is a lot to navigate. And then this semester, I'm teaching an Intro to Sociology, Health and Society class, also primarily upperclassmen who are non-sociology majors. So the course is for students who are pre-med and want to take the MCAT, and now there's a sociology section on the MCAT. So I have bio and chem and neuroscience and all these majors I can't pronounce, and these students are super ambitious and hardworking. So with that comes a lot of pressure for them and also me as well. But nevertheless, I mean, teaching is super rewarding. I really, some folks will, try to opt out teaching it in other ways, and funding may help you do that. But I strongly encourage people to teach at least a semester. I think it's been super rewarding. And as Elizabeth mentioned, I've also taught over the summer. So this past summer, I taught actually high school students with a nonprofit at Princeton. And I also collected data while I was there. And for me, it made me just feel more comfortable in the classroom. Most of our sections will be discussion kind of based. So they're very interactive, very engaging. I know very few people who kind of lecture with slides. So that experience, and particularly working with diverse students with diverse needs, really kind of helped me equip me to kind of navigate the various challenges that our students may face. Michigan is a public university. Students tend to, be higher income. However, we have tons of first generation college students. We have students from all over the country, all over the world. And I think teaching has really made me a more kind of compassionate, empathetic person, just kind of recognizing the pressures that some of, the undergrads face and the pressures we face as well. So if you want to talk more about teaching, like Kim said, I could speak at length because as hard as it is, I love it a lot. So it's a really great experience.
Yeah, one of the things I was looking forward to least in grad school was teaching. At Rice, we did not, it wasn't part of our requirements. And so coming into Michigan, it was really intimidating for me because I had never done it before. And, in graduate school, they do give you resources about how to be a good teacher, and you do take a class on it. But really, we don't go through the kind of education that like teachers go through about pedagogy and, best ways to convey certain things. And so for me, somebody who's pretty risk averse, I was very nervous that I was going to fall flat on my face. And Elizabeth could tell you, I complained the entire summer before having to start teaching. And I say this with full sincerity, it is my favorite thing I've ever gotten to do in graduate school, hands down, no questions. Teaching is like this instant gratification that you get nowhere else in academia. Because we spend a very long time working on projects, writing up, the peer review process. It takes forever. You almost, by the time it gets published, you're like, I don't even care, right? But with teaching, it's completely different. You get to convey information and see these aha moments in real time, and it is so rewarding. It's so much fun. The comments that you get, you made me think about this completely differently, or you made me want to change my major. Like those kinds of comments are the ones that stick with you forever. I literally have my reviews printed out and in a folder for when I'm having a bad day because they make my day. And also I intend to go into the non-academic career track, and teaching by far, and I'm doing work in that realm right now as well, and teaching has been by far the most useful thing for me in my graduate education, aside from learning research methods, I think. But you really have to hone this skill when you're teaching about getting asked questions on the spot and delivering an answer that is both A, correct, and B, easily understood by an audience of 30 people. And that is actually very difficult to do, and that is probably the most intimidating part of teaching. But it's a skill that you really do kind of develop very, very quickly, and that has transferred over to, when I'm presenting to, corporate about something, and they're asking me, questions, and I have to deliver an answer about the research that I did that they both understand and buy. And really, you get there's nowhere else besides teaching that you get that kind of experience in academia or in graduate school. And so for those of you that might be intimidated about teaching, or for those of you that it might not even be part of your package, I encourage you to come in with an open mind, because it might be the thing you enjoy the most in grad school.
Can I add two things too before we go to classes, based on what Billy was saying? So the first is also, if you are worried about teaching or think you don't like teaching, you won't like teaching, it's still worth doing, just in case you have a Billy moment where you realize it's amazing. But also, so you know kind of what career paths you want to consider, because if you are going into academia, you'll have to teach in some capacity, so getting a sense of whether that's something you want to do, it's better to find that out now than when you're, a first-year professor. And then the other thing is that we don't think about teaching as learning too, but it is. So kind of what Billy was saying in terms of the skill you're getting, but also you are, when you're teaching during the semester with a professor, you are taking that class in a sense. So you can use that to either kind of develop an area that you already know about, but think about it in a different way. So that can be helpful for your own research, or to, GSI for a class that you know nothing about, and then you're learning about sociology. So it's not separate from kind of our learning as grad students when we're teaching. So we often kind of separate it, but that's not actually how that works. So like I've taught research methods a bunch of times, and every time I learn about my own methods depending on where I am in the research process, and thinking about kind of how my methods relate to other methods in sociology. So it's all connected. It's all kind of good experience, whether it's your favorite thing ever or not. Which is my favorite thing ever too. So heard from 3 people who love teaching.
And one who hopefully will.
Yes. Well, you have to now, because the 3 of us talked about how great it is.
Yeah. So yeah, I will be teaching next year, but in the meantime, I'm just taking classes. So I'll just run through the classes that I'm taking in my first year, just to get a better sense of what your first year will look like, because I do think that the majority of my time in my first year is dedicated to my classes. So yeah, that's a big part of your life in first year. So in the fall, I took theory and statistics and the pro seminar, and those are all required courses. So theory, statistics are pretty self-explanatory, and then the pro seminar is that sort of orientation or professionalization course that we've been talking about. Rob Jansen, who's the DGS, Director of Grad Studies, teaches it. And some of the topics that were covered were making time for your own research, making sense of the job talks that happen every year, program requirements, and then we had panels of faculty members and panels of grad students speaking on both research, and also for the grad students speaking about things like mental health, sort of tips and tricks for getting through the program, things like that. So theory was 4 hours a week, statistics was 4 hours a week of lecture and 2 hours a week of lab, and then pro seminar was 2 hours a week, 2 or 3, I don't even remember anymore. And then I took one elective in the fall, which was 3 hours a week, and that was the Sociology of Law with Sandy Levitsky. Aya was in it with me, great course. And then in the winter, which is this semester right now, I'm in the second half of theory and the second half of statistics, which are both required. I'm also taking the responsible conduct of research, which is this required course that you take either in your first or your second year. It's kind of like research ethics. And then I'm taking one elective, which is race, ethnicity, and immigration with Jae-yoon Kim, which is also a great course. And I think some people in my cohort are taking 2 electives, so another course of their choice. I haven't taken any classes outside of the department, but one reason that I did choose Michigan, which I didn't mention before, is that Michigan is a comprehensive university, so it has a law school, it has a business school, and I'm really looking forward to taking maybe a class or 2 in the law school in the future. And it is a requirement that you do take 2 classes outside of the sociology department. So that's sort of to broaden your horizons, and I think that's a good thing. Overall, I would say that I've enjoyed my classes, both in terms of what I've learned. I've not only learned substantive things, but also a lot of skills. So how to process a large amount of readings, In Jayoon's race ethnicity class, race ethnicity immigration class, we are writing memos every week, and so that has been really helpful in terms of developing my analytical skills. I would also say that spending a lot of time in classes in your first year is a good thing because you see members of your cohort and you see other students in the department a lot, and you get to know them, and that's been really great. Our cohort sort of hangs out in the grad lounge between classes sometimes. Well, not now because we're all online, but we have this whole year. And yeah, I've just found these classes to be really great for developing a sense of community and getting to know people as well.
Great. So I know I'm conscious of time. I know some people had to leave at 11. So if you have to take off, feel free to do that. I guess the only thing that I would like I know we didn't get to everything. So if you could, everyone who can stay a couple more minutes, if you could just do like a closing statement and just cover anything that you feel is important for the recruits to know, if you want to talk about sort of a cool experience that you've had, or sort of any advice about grad school and starting grad school, but then just anything else you feel like I didn't cover. If you could sort of do that now, and we'll go in sort of reverse order from what we did before. So Kim, Billy, Aya, and then Joyce. But also if you have to drop off, feel free to do that.
So I know you want to do reverse order, but I do have to run, but I do want to say something, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So one thing that I've really appreciated about this community, and one thing that has made my experience so great, is the other graduate students. And as much as faculty are here for, resources and et cetera, I've learned so much about myself. I've learned so much about the department. I've learned so much about Ann Arbor. I've learned so much about just being a budding researcher, a budding sociologist from my friends in the department. And I think those, just having like lunch and coffee with other like advanced graduate students, learning from Kim and the teaching kind of training that we do, those experiences are so invaluable. And that's one of the reasons why I really love Michigan, is because we really try to help one another. I don't feel that type of competitive dog-eat kind of energy at all. And people just want to help. And people are able to admit when they don't know something, but they're always willing to share resources or find some time in their calendar to unpack when you have difficult times and et cetera. And I'll say this and then I'll run off that I had a very tough first semester. My last semester, so the first semester, my second year, was quite difficult for me because of family stuff. And so many people reached out and showered me with great love and support in a way that I hadn't even, thought was possible with people I hadn't even formed close relationships with. So I think that's a beautiful thing about this department, about this community, and something that I truly appreciate. So with that, I'll say sayonara and good luck as you all make your decisions.
Thanks, Aya.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, Kim, you can go ahead.
Anyone else? Okay. I'm trying to think what is most important that I want to say. Well, so echoing Aya's point is that we've said it a lot, which I think goes to the fact that it is true and important that we do have a very supportive department. And especially in grad school, in your first few years of grad school, that's really big because it is a big transition depending on where you're coming from in kind of your life before now into grad school. So wherever you end up, just thinking about what is most important to you, what kind of support you have, how a department may go into kind of supporting you both faculty and grad student wise. And then also just general tips for starting grad school, again, no matter where you go, is just to be patient with yourself and trying not to compare yourself to others, because everyone is coming from a different place when they're starting grad school. You'll have different research interests, different types of research within sociology, so your kind of development in grad school will be very individual. And so kind of letting yourself spend your first year just taking classes and thinking really broadly about your interests, not trying to like jump into everything all at once, and just kind of letting yourself develop intellectually within sociology and figuring out what sociology is and what your research is within sociology is really important. So just kind of keeping that in mind over the next year or so, maybe more, which also goes into my second point with the advice for starting grad school, which is to recognize that you're not going to know everything going in. The point of grad school is to learn as we go. I'm still learning. I've been doing this for 5 years. And that you won't have it all figured out. No one has it all figured out. So if they seem like they have it all figured out, they really don't. Or maybe they do, but you don't have to. So again, just letting grad school happen, working, keep going. There will be hard moments, and just moving along. As long as you're moving in some capacity, then you are making progress. You're learning, even if you don't know that you're learning. And then my last two things, workshops at Michigan are really great. So if you do decide to come here, or you're trying to decide if you want to come here, workshops are amazing because they're a less formal space for you to see what other people are working on, to kind of present your own work and get feedback, but also, get a sense of what research looks like at different stages. So it's kind of a behind the scenes look. And then you can also connect to older grad students, connect to faculty people. And then I mentioned it briefly with our dental, but our graduate student union, or graduate employees organization, GEO, is really amazing. And it's not something that I thought of. I'm not sure any of us really knew about it, maybe going in. No. So I'm telling you all now that it is amazing, and it's a lot of the reason why our funding packages are so good. Like, we get health insurance that we don't pay any premiums into, but we also have a bunch of protections when we are graduate student instructors. So when we're working, or when we're GSRAs, so hours protections, like you can't work more than a certain number of hours. Once you get offered a position, you have to have it. There's a whole union who's working to make sure that we are protected as graduate students, and that's not something that most universities have. So that is important, and a kind of positive for us here in Michigan that we do have that. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, so I want to also echo a bunch of what both Kim and Aya have said. I think, you got into Michigan, and so I'm sure that you have a bunch of great offers, and there really isn't. You can't make a bad decision, likely. So, I think what sets Michigan apart from a lot of other similarly ranked programs, not that their department culture isn't fantastic. I have friends at like all of those programs, and they're all having a great time and a great graduate experience. But the Michigan community within the sociology department, probably in part because of the fact that we're in Ann Arbor, is exceptionally close. And that really isn't something that we're just saying. I mean, I've made a lot of my best friends probably for life in the program, and not just in my own cohort. I mean, just like kind of a fun example, like last night, since we're all practicing, isolation, social distancing, I had a virtual wine night with like 7 other people in the program. And even though I'm in New York City, I still come back once every 2 months, honestly, just to hang out with people. I get season tickets to football with a bunch of people in the program because I know I have an excuse to come back on Saturdays and hang out with everyone. It really is a very, very close department, and you likely will find that you're going to make very, very good friends in the program who are incredibly supportive. I mean, there wasn't ever an achievement that I've ever had that I didn't feel like I could immediately tell the next person who walked into the computer lab. I really can't say enough about how if looking for a good department culture is important to you, I think that you will be incredibly happy with what you find at Michigan. In regard to advice for starting graduate school, I mean, just speaking from my own experience, I was mostly nervous. I had, a ton of imposter syndrome. I'm a first-gen college student, so I did not feel like I was going to be able to hack it, and that sure enough, when I got to graduate school, they were all going to figure out that they had made a huge mistake, and why would they let this guy who has terrible things to say about every reading, why did they let him into graduate school? But I would say do as much as you can to sort of acknowledge that isn't the case. And I think you're going to find that the transition into graduate school is going to be a lot better than you expect it to be. It's going to be hard, and I'm sure you will face imposter syndrome once you get here as well. But the workload is not insurmountable. You are absolutely smart enough to do this. And you actually probably will find that these are going to be some of the best years of your life, some of the most challenging, but honestly some of the most rewarding. I wish that I had known going into graduate school just how much fun I was going to have, because that summer leading into it probably would have been a lot less anxiety inducing if I had both known that and allowed myself to know it. So yeah, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Best of luck in your decision-making process, and I hope to see you in Ann Arbor next fall.
Yeah, I would like to echo what everyone has said. Like Kim, plugging the workshops, which I have found very, very helpful just to see works in progress being presented and see how people give feedback to them. And then also GEO, which is our union, is really, really great. I don't know. I think I've had a really positive experience in my first year. I've felt very supported and have felt like the department is a very functional department and does really try to listen to what its grad students are trying to say. Throughout this whole sort of coronavirus, COVID-19 transition online, we've gotten a lot of emails from Karen, who's the department chair, and Rob, the director of graduate student studies, just checking in on us and listening to our concerns, and laying out sort of plans of action of how they're planning to support everyone in the department. So I think that's a very good indicator of the fact that this department is running very functionally and is looking out for everyone who is a member of the community. I would say for the first year, there is definitely an adjustment period, but I think, I don't know, just leaning on members of your cohort who are all going through the same thing, leaning on older graduate students, like Aya said, who are super accessible and have gone through this in the past. And then for me, it's been really important to schedule in time to not work. So I've taken an art class, I've had a book club with some friends back home, and that's been really important to me as well. But yeah, I would just say good luck with the decision. There's no bad decision, and hopefully we'll see you next year.
Great. Well, thank you to our amazing panelists. Thanks, Joyce, Billy, Kim, and Aya. We're really, really excited to see most of your faces in the fall, and we hope that this virtual recruitment has been a good experience for you. Feel free to reach out to any of us. Our emails are all on the website, and then they're also posted right next to the video, so feel free to reach out to any of us about anything, especially things that we brought up in the video. But we look forward to hopefully seeing you soon.
Bye. Good luck, everyone.